Okay, I'm going to walk you through and give you examples of some practice questions. And these questions will look very similar to what you will see on your quiz on Thursday. So we're on chapter 7. We're doing ratios, proportions, percents, decimals, fractions. And so Thursday's quiz will have about 15 questions on there. And first section, you're going to be finding equivalent ratios. So this is basically like making equivalent fractions. So when we're doing equivalent ratios, you either have to be multiplying by the same number on top and bottom or dividing by the same number on top and bottom. You can only be dividing by the same number on top and bottom if your fraction or ratio is not in simplest form. So number 1 here is already in simplest form. So I could multiply by the same thing on top and bottom. I'm choosing to multiply by something easy, so I'm going by 2. I multiply by 2 on top and bottom. 5 times 2 is 10. 8 times 2 is 16. That's one equivalent ratio, 10 to 16. Another equivalent ratio would be multiplying by 3. So 5 times 3 is 15. 8 times 3 is 24. That would be another equivalent ratio. Okay, number 2, we can actually divide on this one because our fraction or ratio is not in simplest form. So I could divide by 2 if I wanted to. If you didn't want to divide, that's totally fine. You could do the multiply by 2, multiply by 3 thing. Totally fine. 4 divided by 2 gets you 2. 6 divided by 2 gets you 3. So 2/3 is an equivalent ratio. This time I can't reduce this guy any farther. So I'm going to choose to multiply now. I'm going to times by 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 12. So I have 8 to 12 is another equivalent ratio. Okay. This one down here already in simplest form, so I'm just going to multiply by 2 on top and bottom. I get 14 over 18. Then I can choose to multiply by 3 or whatever number you want. Doesn't matter. I'm just keeping it simple by multiplying by 2 and 3. 7 times 3 is 21. 9 times 3 is 27. So 21 to 27 would also be another equivalent ratio. Last one down here. I could simplify this one if I wanted to. I'm going to choose not to simplify this one. You don't have to. You don't have to divide. So I'm just going to multiply it out. Times by 2 on top and bottom. 16 over 20. Then I'm going to choose to multiply by 3 on top and bottom. I get 24 over 30. The important thing is that you're multiplying or dividing by the same number on top and bottom. You have to do that. Otherwise, it's not an equivalent ratio. Okay, so if we're moving down to this next section here, this is where I want you to circle which ones show equivalent ratios, meaning that they have to have been multiplied or divided by the same number on top and bottom in order for it to be an equivalent ratio. Okay, so let's look at this first one here. 5 times what got me 20? 4. 5 times what got me 20? 4. They were multiplied by the same thing on top and bottom, so it is an equivalent ratio. I'm going to circle it. You could also just look at this guy and know that 5 over 5 is 1. The same way as 20 over 20 is 1. So 1 does equal 1. Yes, they are equivalent. Okay, let's look at our second one over to the right here. 4 times what gets me 16? I had 4 times 4. Now I'm checking. Does 7 times 4 really equal 28? It does, so this is an equivalent ratio. Coming down here. Okay, I can already see something wrong with this one because if I'm looking at the top, 5 times something gets me 32. Well, there's no even number that would get me 32. Let's check the bottom. 7 times what gets me 42? That would be times 6. But 5 times 6 does not equal 32. So that's a no. It's not an equivalent ratio. Okay, next one. This is one where if I'm looking at the first fraction and the second fraction. So my first fraction is bigger. So I would say 16 divided by what gets me 4? 16 divided by 4 gets me 4. Now I'm checking the same thing on the bottom. Does 20 divided by 4 really equal 5? It does, so I know it's an equivalent ratio. because it worked out that I divided by the same number on top and bottom and got the same thing. Got what I should have gotten. So 16 divided by 4 really is 4, and 20 divided by 4 really is 5. Okay, going to our last row. 1 times what gets me 7? 3 times 7. So now I'm checking, does 4 times 7 really equal 24? Nope, it doesn't, so it's not an equivalent ratio. Last one, 11 times what gets me 33? That'd be times 3. Now I'm checking, does 12 times 3 really equal 36? It does, so it's an equivalent ratio. Okay. Next section is on finding the unit rate for one item. So I did this nicely already for you in that I put the labels there. Okay. So if I'm being given, you spend $48 for 8 books, how many are you going to spend on one book? So all I'm doing is taking 48 divided by 8 in order to figure out how much I'm spending on one book. And 48 divided by 8 is $6. So $6 for one book. Next one, $100 for 5 soccer balls. I'm taking 100 divided by 5 to figure out what I spend on just one soccer ball, and that would be $20. Last one, I'm spending $15.15 for 3 tickets. How much am I spending for just one ticket? So I'm taking 15 divided by 3. You could just know off the top of your head that this is 505, because I know that 15 divided by 3 is 5, and 15 divided by 3 is also 5. Or I could work it out for here using long division. 3 goes into 15 5 times. Okay, 3 cannot go into 1, so I have to put my 0 there, bring down my 5. 3 goes into 15 5 times, and that's how I got my 505. So that one you might have to work out long division. And there might be one on your quiz that you have to work out long division. Okay. Next section is that we're solving for proportions using cross multiplication. So remember, this is your crisscross, and you're setting up basically like an algebra problem. So I am taking x times 18 has to equal 12 times 15. I'm not going to let you use calculators for this. I will keep the numbers reasonable enough that you can work them out just fine. Okay, so I have 18 times x, or 18x, is going to equal 180. That's 12 times 15 is 180. You might have to work that out on the side, and you can totally do that. There's my 180. And now I'm saying 18 times x, or 18 times something, equals 180. The opposite of multiplying, be dividing by 18 on each side. And so we get x is equal to 10. And that would be for number 9. Let's try number 10. So you have 8 times 30 has to equal 20 times something. So 20 times x. 8 times 30 is 240 equals 20 times x, or 20x. The opposite of 20 times x is divided by 20. Dividing by 20 on each side, and I get x is equal to 12. Last example here. Cross multiplying again. 6 times x is equal to 15 times 16. Okay, again, you might have to work it out on the side. That's totally fine. You get 240. So 6 times x, or 6x, has to equal 240. The opposite of 6 times x is divided by 6. Dividing by 6 on each side, and I get x is equal to 40. And that's my answers. Okay, so you're solving for x in those. Set up a proportion, cross multiply. Okay, we have 2 more sections to go through. So this one, you are converting each number that I give you to make sure that you are going to a percent, decimal, and fraction in simplest form. So for number 12, I'm giving you the percent already. I need you to go to a decimal and then to a fraction in simplest form for me. So in order to go to the decimal, I'm moving my decimal place 2 places to the left. 1, 2. So my decimal would be 0.03. Okay? For my fraction, I'm saying I have a 3. And what spot is my 3 in? It's in the hundredths place. So I have 3 over 100. That is my fraction. It's already in simplest form. Okay, next one. So I have 19 over 100. If I automatically have a 100 on the bottom, that's exactly like saying 19%. So if there's a 100 on the bottom of your fraction, you can automatically take that top number and make it into a percent. So 19 over 100 is the same as saying 19%. Or if I'm making it into a decimal, I'm going to move that decimal place 2 places to the left. And my decimal is 0.19. Okay, next one. I have 7 over 10. This is a little bit different. So I have a 10 on the bottom. I would either have to convert that to a 100. So I would say 10 times what gets me 100? That would be 10. So I'd multiply by 10 on top and bottom, and that would be like saying 70 over 100. And now notice I have a 100 on the bottom, so I can immediately go into my percent. And that would be like saying 70%. Move my decimal 2 places to the left, 1, 2. And I get 0.7. The other way would have been, because you had this 10 down here, you would have known that 7 is in the tenths place of your decimal, so you could have gone to your decimal first and then to your percent. It's up to you however you do that. Okay, last one. So I have 0.75. So I have, if I want to make a percent out of this, then I'm going to move that decimal place. This time I'm moving it 2 to the right because I didn't start off with a percent, I started off with a decimal. So I'm going to move it back 2 places to the right. 1, 2, gets me 75%. And now here comes the part, because I need to convert this into a fraction, but I need that fraction to be in simplest form. So I have a 75 and it ends in the hundredths place. So I'm saying 75 over 100. However, that is not simplified yet. I have a greatest common factor of 25, so I'm going to divide by 25 on top and bottom. 75 divided by 25 is 3. 100 divided by 25 is 4. So 3/4 is my simplest form fraction. Okay. Make sure you're giving me each of the answers in each form. So if I give you a decimal, you're giving me the percent and fraction. If I give you a fraction, you're giving me the percent and decimal. If I give you a percent, you're giving me the decimal and fraction. Okay. Last section to go through. Finding the percent of the number. This is what we worked on Monday, or if you're watching this video on Tuesday, what we did yesterday. Okay, so we're finding 30% of 20. So I remember that I like to use the decimal form, and that's what I saw most of you using. So that's what I'm going to show you most of in this video. So I'm taking 3 times 2 is 6. I had 2 zeros that I had in my original number, so I'm adding 2 behind it. And because I used a percent in my number, I'm going to move that decimal 2 places over. 1, 2, And so 30% of 20 is equal to 6. Next one. I have 44 times 6. Might have to work this one out over to the side. 44 times 6 gets you 264. There's a 0 that I didn't use, so I need to add that back to it. Because I have a percent, I'm moving my decimal place 2 places over. 1, 2. And so 44% of 60 is 26.40. Remember, if you have a 0 on the back end, you don't necessarily have to include that 0. You could just leave it as 26.4. It's up to you. I'm not going to take off if you leave the 0 because it doesn't change the number. Okay, next one. I have 9 times 75. I'm going to work that out off to the side. 75 times 9 gets me 675. There's a 0 that I didn't use, so I'm going to add that to the back. And I'm going to move my decimal place 2 places over. 1, 2. So 90% of 75 is 67.50. Okay. This next one, 10% of 160. So I have 1 times 16 is 16. I had 2 zeros that I didn't use. 0, 0. I move my decimal 2 places back. 1, 2. So it's 16 is 10% of 160. Last one. I have 75% of 240. This one I might like to use my trick. I like to use the trick of converting my percent into a fraction when I have percents such as 25, 50, 75, or when I have percents such as 20, 40, 60, 80. So that would be all my 1/4 or 1/5. It just makes it easy for me. If you want to keep doing the decimal form and multiply it out, totally fine. But if I was doing my fraction where I'm converting to a fraction, 75 converts to 75 over 100, which simplified equals 3/4. So I'm saying, what is 3/4 of 240? Well, now I'm going to look, what is 240 divided by 4? 240 divided by 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6. Add my 0 is 60. Okay? It's saying that I have 3 of those. So I'm going to take 60 times 3 equals 180. And that is my answer. You would have gotten the same answer if you chose to do decimal form on it. It's up to you. Okay? Quiz is on Thursday, and there's just going to be about 15 questions. I had more on this practice quiz than there will be on the actual quiz. I just wanted to give you a little bit of extra practice with it. Okay?